Alright, so I don't know if anybody who watches my videos now is aware, but I used to teach primarily mathematics to primarily high school age kids with a history of not attending school and needing to get their GED because they are in juvie, they're in jail, and they often missed school. And a lot of times they're 16, 17, and they have like 1, 2 credits in high school. So there's not really a very promising future for them in high school. They're unlikely to stick around for that and finish their diploma. So getting them a GED so that they can go get a job, they can go live their life, pretty much the plan, right? But these are also kids who haven't seen anything. They haven't seen math, they haven't seen English, they haven't seen school for the most part since maybe 6th or 7th grade. Okay, so a significant part of my job was to get these kids ready to pass a GED when I can only meet with them for like 2 or 3 1-hour sessions in a week before they have to take their GED. So I have to get them basically from zero to passing a GED like that, right? So I quickly learned how to teach people how to do math, how to take a math test using strategies that don't fuck around. Okay? So when I'm telling you shit about how to take a math test, that's real shit, right? I'm not going to tell you, oh, well, spend 400 hours figuring out where the decimal place goes on this one. No, that's not how it fucking works. That's a waste of time. Look at the goddamn options. Look at your possible answers. You should be able to rule two of them out almost immediately. And if you don't even understand the question, like if you don't really even understand the question, you still just made it 50-50. Right? You understand how much better that is compared to 1 and 4? Like, having half a brain and being able to just rule out two of the possible four answers because you actually bothered to look at what they were? That's powerful. That's powerful. That alone can take you from failing to passing. Right? Obsessing about knowing how to do the math and then matching whatever answer you get to the possible answers because now this is the first time you've looked at the possible answers after you've done the math. That is a fucking terrible way to do things, and that is how you fail a test. Why would you do that? That's a terrible fucking way to do this. And any tutor who's teaching you to do that doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. They're completely stupid. And you should not be listening to them. They don't know what they're doing. Okay? You get me? They don't know what the fuck they're telling you. Do not listen to them. That person is a goddamn hack. Do not listen to them. Okay? But then there's other really simple things, right? So, like decimal places. Let's actually look at that. How do decimal places really work? Powers of 10, scientific notation shit. Okay? So, anything to the 0 power is 1, right? So this is 10 to the 0. And as we go up, powers of 10, you'll notice that the number of zeros after the 1 is the same as the exponent, right? So like this is 10 to the ninth. Okay. So this is the first thing that usually you see when you're learning scientific notation. And it's relatively straightforward. Problem is, when you get something like this, what do you do here? A lot of students who are, in the category that I was talking about, a lot of students who were just new to this, who haven't seen it before, will put 9 zeros after the 7. Okay? Because what they have been told is that this is the number of zeros. In this case, that's wrong. What this is the number of digits after the first digit. The number of digits. Okay? So, here, there's 9 digits after that 1. They just happen to all be zeros. Here, there's 1 digit after the 1. It just happens to be a 0. If all we have to work with is tens, all we get is a 1 with zeros. That this 0 is coming from this 0. These 9 zeros, that's 9 copies of this 0. That's what that is. Here, we have something other than a 0 to copy. Right? That's what's happening here. So you get I let my hand do stupid shit. Okay. So you get this. Alright. Okay. So this part isn't rocket science. A lot of people are going to be familiar with this. This next one, though. What happens if you have negative exponents? When you have negative exponents, the shit that people tell you is fucking convoluted, right? So let's just take this. Let's just make it nice and easy. And I'm just going to use an E like you would see on a calculator, followed by the exponent, because it's a lot quicker to write than times 10 to the, right? So let's make this like -7. Okay. So 1.0 times 10 to the -7 power. That's what I mean by this. All right. So like up here. That would be like that. Okay. So what's actually happening here? Here, contrary to what you have been told, almost certainly, it actually is the number of zeros. It's the number of zeros in front. So I'm going to just drop in 7 zeros. And then I'm going to put in my 1 0. And then right here, after that first 0, I put in my decimal point. 100% of the time that will be correct. What they will tell you is that you need to take an unknown number of zeros, and your decimal point was here, but we need to move it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 places to there. Well, watch this. If I line these up, that's the same fucking thing. But you know what? it's a whole lot easier to count something than it is to count nothing. And when you're counting the spaces between the digits here, that's literally what you do. You're counting nothing. It's way the fuck easier to count off 7 zeros and then drop in the 1 0 after it, and then come back and put a decimal point after that first one, than it is to count 7 empty spaces that are tiny and invisible because they're not. There isn't a thing there. There's nothing there to count. You see, the advice that I give you is practical. It's not the retarded ass bullshit that they teach you in school. It's not the retarded ass bullshit that some hack 17-year-old math tutor who doesn't know how to do anything, who's never had an actual job, who's never dealt with people, who's never actually faced any real problems in his life, never had to figure out anything, does barely, like, he has a perfectly fine head on his shoulders, but he's never had to use it before. He doesn't know anything. All he's doing is regurgitating the stupid shit that his dumbass teachers told him. And his teachers are stupid because... Do you understand how the public school system in the U.S. works? Public school system in the U.S. literally does its best to discourage people who are competent from being teachers. Fundamentally, under capitalism, if you're competent at what you do, you're going to go into a trade. You're going to go do an actual job. You're not going to be a teacher. So the only people who are going to be teachers are people who don't know what the fuck they're doing. So they'll tell you shit like, count the spaces between the digits to find how many, like, where to put the decimal place, instead of being like, oh, this is a negative exponent? I'll just drop that many zeros out in front and put the decimal point after the first one. And this does two things for you when you do it this way. It does two things for you, because 0 point whatever the fuck is the correct way to write it. Right? This way of writing it, where it's just point whatever, that's hard to read. That's really easy to confuse for something else. It's really easy to fuck that up. And you might notice now there's only 6 zeros. But if you write it correctly, there's now 7 zeros. Exactly that many. And this, it doesn't matter. We can grab this. Let's just do that. Like, that times 10 to the negative 18th. So I'm just going to put in 18 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. There's that. I'm just copying and pasting. Guarantee you that's correct. And what I did is I counted 18 somethings instead of 18 nothings. It's way easier to get it wrong when you're counting 18 nothings than it is when you're counting 18 somethings. Because that's how your fucking brain works. When you're counting shit, you're counting actual things. So having to count nothing, that's setting yourself up for failure. That's how you fuck these problems up. Because somebody told you something that's just stupid. That's just completely unhinged from reality. I mean, it works, kind of. But it's a fucking ridiculous way to do it. Like, yeah, that decimal point moved from here to here to here to here. Like, it kind of did. It jumped those spaces. That's sort of true. But when we write it out correctly, we get 18 zeros. And that first one has a decimal point after it. It only doesn't work when you write it incorrectly, when you write it like a fucking idiot. See, if it's written like this, because this character takes up width on the screen, even if for whatever reason that's invisible, like it doesn't print out correctly, you can still tell there was something there. And you can probably tell that it was something small, which means it was probably a decimal point, which means this number is still readable when it's printed out like this, even if the decimal point doesn't come through when it's printed. For some reason it gets lost in the print. This number is still readable. But if we wrote it like this, and this gets lost in the print, what happened? Should the decimal point be here? And this is just a weird font. Should the decimal point be here? Is there why are there just a bunch of zeros up there? Who knows? Who knows? But you put that zero out front, that decimal point, because it's small, just doesn't print correctly. Still a readable number, and you can tell that it's correct. There should be a decimal point there because there's space between these zeros that's not between these ones, right? There's a way to the way shit works. These little redundancies in the system are on purpose. They're there to help you. Why is everybody acting like they're in the way, or they just ignore them? These are features that are fucking important. They're useful. What are you doing? Pay attention to the right shit, and life becomes way the fuck easier. See how much easier this is now? When it's a negative, you're actually counting zeros. When it's a positive, you're counting digits after the first one. I guarantee you nobody's explained to you scientific notation that way before. And I also guarantee you if you struggled with scientific notation before, you won't now. You got this. After you sit there and think about this a couple times, you got it. Forever. Because this is the way to think about it. This is the right way to think about it. Right. Negative exponent, count the zeros, decimal point after the first one. And the zeros go out front. Right? A negative 7 exponent means there's 7 zeros in front of that 1. Decimal point after the first one. Negative 18, there's 18 zeros in front of that 4. Decimal point after the first one. Always a decimal point after the first one, because that's the correct way to write it. And if you write it correctly like that, the number of zeros is exactly that exponent. Always. Every single time. Here, positive exponent, we're counting digits after the first one. Alright, so if we did like this, okay, that's going to be, well, how many digits after the first one? It's 3, so right there. Like that. So the shit they tell you in school, when they're like, oh, if it's a positive, it's that many zeros after the... No, it's digits. And when it's a negative, you move the decimal place this many spaces. No, you put that many zeros out front. And then you put a decimal point after the first 0. If you're handwriting it, it's easy, because that decimal point is small, so it'll fit between your first two zeros. If you're typing it, it's easy to just insert it right there. All right. There's 18 of them here, I promise you. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18 zeros. Decimal after the first one. That easy. That easy. And nobody in your mathematical career understood it well enough to tell you that. Appreciate that for a second. That I'm the first person who's telling it to you this way.